Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. Yeah, I like that clap. Let's get that going. Let's get that energy going. Yes. Good morning. Welcome to Brown Line Church. We're going to start with some worship this morning. So if you'd like to stand or as you're able, whatever posture feels right to you, and join us in some music. We'd love to lead you. We are knit together as one. Where I'm going to lead us together in a prayer this morning. This comes from Xavier University's collection of prayers for Black History Month. This is a prayer from Meditations of the Heart by Howard Thurman, an African-American mystic and author. So I'm going to invite all of you to pray with me. The words should be on the screen there, so feel free to say these words with me. Lord, Lord, open unto me. Open unto me. Fight for my darkness. Light for my darkness. Open unto me. Courage for my fear. Open unto me. Hope for my despair. Open unto me. Peace for my turmoil. Open unto me. Joy for my sorrow. Open unto me. Strength for my weakness. Open unto me. Wisdom for my confusion. Open unto me. Forgiveness for my sins. Open unto me. Tenderness for my toughness. Open unto me. Love for my hates. Open unto me. Thyself for myself. Lord, Lord, open unto me. Amen. So good to sing and pray with you all. Thank you so much. You may be seated.
Amen. Thank you, Jen and Kay and Vince. If we can give them a round of applause for leading us this morning. Hello, everyone. My name is Hayley, and I'm one of the pastors here at Brown Line Church. Welcome. So glad that you can join us both at the Davis and online. If you'd like to participate in our live chat for this morning, you can do so by using your phone's camera to follow the QR code that will pop up on the screen. This will take you to the free app Discord, where our chat lives, and we also have a moderator looking over that chat. So Alicia is joining us today, and she will be hanging out if you have any questions or need anything. A special hello to you if you are new or newer that's joining with us this morning. I really look forward to connecting with you at some point today. Brown Line Church is both a local and an online community. We're based here in Chicago, but we draw many from beyond Chicago each Sunday. So if you are joining from afar, we'd love to hear where you are joining from, and you can put that in the chat on Discord. This church was started to help people connect with the God of love, find spiritual health and deeper community, and contribute to justice and healing in the world. This tends to draw in particular, people who feel more comfortable in culturally progressive settings rather than religious settings. People who maybe didn't grow up in a highly religious environment, or people who have chosen to leave that environment. And our guide here is Jesus. There are religious settings that prevent faith in Jesus as this thing that you're either inside of or outside of, as an exclusive thing. But our experience is entirely different. For us, following Jesus has always made us more open, more loving and inclusive, never more closed off. So I'm going to invite Vince to join me up here for our message today. And as he comes up and gets settled, I would love to invite our kids to have their own space together. So preschoolers and elementary age kids will go over to Theater 3 for a time to hang out with friends and do a prayer exercise, watch a little show together too. So right now, Miss Abby and Mr. Joe are in the back of the theater, and they're waving their hands so you can see them. Parents, if your kids are joining today, just make sure that we've got a contact number for you in case they need to reach you, and then they will be brought back over here at the end of the service. Hey, Vince.
Hello. Thank you, Hayley. So good to get to sing with you all this morning, too. Hi, everybody. We're closing our series on belonging this week, aren't we?
Yes, we are. And we have been talking about belonging over the past few weeks, both this external process of belonging to different communities and different groups, things like that, but also really as this internal journey as well. Discord has been really great for crowdsourcing different tips and things on belonging and collecting some stories. So please feel free to continue using that today as we close up this discussion. And we've hoped to cast a vision of what it can actually look like in practical ways to find belonging here in this particular community too. And we'll definitely circle back to that at the end of this talk. So for today, we're going to talk more about belonging to one another, the real gift that is, and some challenges that definitely brings. I think that individualism, along with a lot of other forces, can really lead us to think that we are alone in the world, or that we don't need others, that we can only rely on and trust ourselves. But the reality is, and I think we all know this to some extent, is that we are bettered by community. We need the perspectives and experiences of others to really shape us and deepen our sense of connection and belonging. So if we are going to envision a Jesus-centered approach to our belonging, which is our hope, it's our goal, it must be one that holds both the beauty and the tension of being tethered to other humans who are really complex and messy, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, it makes me think about your the first week on belonging. You mentioned either or thinking, and we can often get into that mindset. It's like either the community is perfect and everybody is kind to each other at all moments, there is never problems, or I tried that and they were mean to me, or something. There's this real either or thinking that is a challenge. So we want to talk about. I think the first beat that we wanted to go on is talking about conflict.
Yeah.
Belonging community is something we all want to talk about, but we can't have it without conflict resolution, and that's something we want to talk about less. So there are a lot of things. There are a lot of reasons conflict might happen in a community like ours. So one is differences in background, opinion, or personality. We say this a lot about BLC. We say it in our welcome every week, but we are very intentionally a space where not everyone comes from the same religious assumptions or backgrounds or experiences. Even people within Christianity, it's which tradition of Christianity, there's lots of variance. And sometimes we don't realize how attached we are to a certain type of prayer or a certain belief or a certain worship, types of worship songs or something, right? Certain routines, even certain personality traits that a whole community can take on. Is this place more earnest or is it more sarcastic? There are little things that until we are confronted with a space that normalizes something different, we don't realize how attached we were to those things. And so conflict can arise from that in settings like ours. And I can remember lots of examples in the decade of this church where the conflicts that arose out of such realizations went really well. People learned about each other and got curious and asked questions and respected each other. And honestly, I can remember lots of examples from the decade of this church so far where it didn't go so well. And people really avoided and then eventually disappeared and never thought to maybe ask a question or approach something, because that's really scary and that can be hard to do. People who, sometimes people have taken things personally and then, and come up with generalizations that may or may not be totally true. So yeah, it's messy.
It is, and I think it's really important just to name the role that having assumptions about other people's plays, especially in religious communities and faith communities. There's almost this surface level acceptance of holding the tension. I think it'd be rare to find a place that's we're not welcoming.
We're
Explicitly we are not welcoming.
Yeah.
We welcome people from all backgrounds. What a great value. But then you all
Sorry, I'm just imagining the church on the corner that's you're not welcome here.
Exactly. But so we have this surface level idea of everyone's welcome here. But then there's this underlying assumption. I think this can take place in this community too.
Sure,
of but actually everyone here really does think like me and believe what I believe.
Yeah.
And so it's this tension between this great value and the reality that it's really easy to just assume that because you've landed in a similar place, people must fall in line with everything that you align with. But we all have such different experiences and different backgrounds.
Yep.
There is definitely going to be a lot of overlap and commonality, but there's also going to be a lot of diversity of thought and experience, and that doesn't have to be a threat. That can really enrich community.
Absolutely. Getting away from that either or again. It is not a threat. It's a good thing. Yeah. Other things that might cause conflict in a community like ours is differing expectations on what a friendship is. I remember being caught in the middle once of one person in Brownline Church who was in a space where they were actively looking for more friends. They just moved here. And then I was caught in the middle between that person and another person whose sort of relationship spots were all filled up. Somebody gave me the image of a Lego block, once all the Lego blocks are filled up, you can't attach any more pieces. And I remember that was really hurtful for the person who's actively looking for friends, because it's really hard. When, I was thinking we were this and you were thinking that, and that's not necessarily anyone did anything wrong or it was anyone's fault, but it's just that's the messiness of community. I remember, let's see, what other things that cause conflict? Microaggressions can cause conflict in a space like that. I mean, I remember being the perpetrator of a microaggression once to a friend of mine in Brownline Church, And they were so gracious to me in response as they confronted me, and that taught me a lot about conflict, about good conflict. Romantic relationships, starting and ending, can like sometimes ending, sometimes new romantic. I mean, all of that can be really difficult for a community, right? I remember being in a circle of friends in my early 20s, and like one particular relationship starting was really difficult for another person in that circle because it was like unrequited love, you know, and that was really difficult. Like that can happen in a community like ours, or when relationships sometimes end. Like the ripple effects can cause a lot of goodbyes and confusion, and it might not be necessarily anybody's fault, but it's hard and it presents problems.
Yeah, I think all of these that we've named so far, it's not necessarily a direct conflict. Like sometimes we can think of, we can have this perception of conflict as it being some type of like aggressive act or something, some major, but these are all just things that may not even be intended to have a ripple effect, to affect more than just the people involved.
And I think that's what we want to focus in on today, because there are stories we can tell. Frankly, and maybe they're a time or a message for another time about what happens when there's aggression or when there's abuse or things like that. But just in the day in, day out of like we're trying to belong and we're trying to belong in a community, there are these things where not necessarily anybody being inappropriate or being wrong or being bad or being at fault. It's just conflict happens, and we need to normalize that. The last one of just our list of like things that might cause conflict in our communities, generational misunderstandings, right? Like, do you all know that if you were born in like, or if you came of age, I should say, if you came of age in like the 70s or the 80s, your relationship to your calendar is so freaking different than people who came of age in the 90s, right? You realize that? Like, so, and then all of you who came of age like post 2000, I don't even know how you, like, do you even keep it? No, I'm just joking. So, like, but it's all, like, those little things change based on just, like, as culture changes, as generations change and come of age in different times. So that can cause conflict.
Yeah. Another one that comes to mind for me, and I used to think this was just a me thing, but I've read enough about it and I've heard from other people. It's not just me.
Okay, yeah.
So as a millennial, I use a lot of exclamation points in written communication, like in texts and emails, so much so to the point where I'm like, okay, I can't use too many. Like I want to make sure they know I'm happy, I'm in a good mood.
You have like a ration for your
but I don't want to come off as like too much, too aggressive.
Yeah.
But older generations tend to use more periods in written communication in texts and emails. And I have definitely had moments where I've internalized that as, oh, this person is like shutting down the conversation, or they're mad at me, they're annoyed, all of that. Gen Z even, I didn't know this was a thing. You can go in and change your settings on your phone so that all of your things are lowercase, like uppercase letters.
You can't use uppercase at all?
At the start of sentences.
Whoa.
I don't know. I'm just saying, all of these different things, they seem so minor, but it can really lead to different misunderstandings of tone in text. It's the difference between like yes and yes, you know? Like that's
it. Yeah, that's a big
something
difference.
I think about.
Yes, yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. I think about sometimes we can assign, I'm talking about making generalizations. And sometimes we can, based on whether it's generational differences or something else, we might call somebody something like, oh my gosh, like they're so, they're too much, right? Like you're saying, or oh gosh, they're so flaky, right? Like little things like that can, I don't know, like those are, it's really easy for us to jump to drawing conclusions, and that can be a place where it's easy to do that because it feels like it evades conflict. That is what it is. I label that person and then I can escape it. But I don't know, like maybe we're missing the chance to actually talk there.
Yeah, the point that you had about calendar and commitment differences with that word flaky.
Oh yeah.
That one, I understand it, and it really hits a nerve with me
Really?
actually, as someone who has both mental illness and chronic illness. And I think that this goes beyond generational differences with thinking about calendars and can get into some ableism as well. But thinking about the difference between having limits and boundaries and someone being flaky. It brings to mind for me, two of my closest friends have been friends from childhood, and we all live in different places now and rarely get to see each other. We also all deal with different mental and chronic illnesses too. And so when we are in the same place at the same time, we have still developed this kind of accepted flakiness, is what I've called it. And we realize that it's not personal. even if this is the one time a year that we're all back in Massachusetts where I'm from, if one of us cancels and can't be there, it's not something that I take personally. Or if I need to cancel last minute, it's not something that they take personally. And I think it's just super helpful to have that common ground of understanding in this particular relationship, that the intention and the meaning is there and the desire to be together and connect is there, but sometimes just the reality is there isn't the capacity in that day to actually follow through and be together.
That just seems so incredibly healthy that this group of friends has named that and talked about that so that it's out of the way and you don't have to have the wonderings and the generalizations happening. I mean, that just seems so healthy. And yeah, I like it. I think it feels really good. Yeah. So what do we do in terms? What does it mean if those are the threats, possible threats to a community, or if we can see them as not threats when we're trying to facilitate belonging? I think some of the things I think about is a healthy community acknowledges these things and doesn't try to pretend that they're not happening. That's a little bit of what we've tried to do, just in sort of giving a laundry list of like, hey, by the way, you might be in conflict for this or that reason. We want to acknowledge this. We don't want to pretend that those things don't happen. We don't want to like put it, think that we can accomplish things just by like a checklist of saying we're welcoming, and so therefore nobody will have any problems ever. That's not true. I lost my notes here. Yeah, so one of my favorite quotes on this matter is actually a quote. It's about healthy marriage from a marriage expert named John Gottman, who became famous for a research project over like several years that demonstrated that he could watch a couple arguing for 3 minutes and determine with like absurd accuracy, like 90% plus accuracy, whether that marriage would continue or end in divorce. It was like people were like, "Who is this guy, and what have you discovered?" And his, like, if he boiled it down to one phrase, what he discovered is, "It's not how much you fight; it's how you fight." I think it's a wonderful quote. And I think it applies to community as much as it applies to a partnership. If we belong to one another, we have to be committed to fighting well, not pretending that fights don't happen. Being humble enough to acknowledge our own individual tendencies toward defensiveness or criticism or name calling or avoiding, and then trying our best to give the benefit of the doubt. Like I remember learning as a prayer practice the idea of turning judgments into wonder, making this a prayer that you actually do in your head. When I find myself saying like, why would they, blah, 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 fill in the blank. Why would they, why would you do that, blah, blah. Switching that to, and in my mind, it's a prayer of, I switch it to, I wonder why they, because even that is like that tone thing of like, it's a shift. It's, and instead of why would they, it's, I wonder why they. And that to me has felt really helpful.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like tricking yourself, but it really works for me.
Yeah, no, it's leading with curiosity, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
So along with conflict, we also want to talk about family today. And we've kind of been referring to this as the belonging you don't choose, which I think is really interesting. Yeah. Because you have this unique nature of being a part of your family of origin, and that deeply impacts you, and it impacts your sense of belonging, and it's not a community that you necessarily choose to be a part of. And you get all of these things like your conflict management style, your values, your communication.
How my dad I am.
It really is, though. All of these things often form because of your family or in spite of your family.
Yes, that too.
In her book, Braving the Wilderness, where she talks a lot about belonging, Brené Brown has a chapter that she titled, People Are Hard to Hate Up Close, Move In, which I really like. And for many of us, I think our most up-close experiences are with family. And I don't want to overgeneralize here because I know that there's just such a vast array of experiences when it comes to family. But I do think that a trend I've seen is that with family, there can be a greater acceptance of how complex people are. Because we have this sense of hope of how a person should or may fill a particular role, what having a parent might feel like or should feel like, how siblings should act together, and whether or not that ideal really matches the reality that's in front of you, sometimes in really small ways, sometimes in really big, drastic ways. There's still this underlying acceptance of like, oh, but it's my dad. Or, oh, it's just grandma being grandma. Like
even that phrase, that's right. There's this acceptance of the complexity. Yeah.
Because I think there's to some extent, this required closeness.
Sure.
And so there's greater permission to really see through just the messiness of being human, the character flaws, the disagreements, all of that, and actually look and hold on to the best in people.
Yes, yeah.
And I've been thinking about it this week, and I think that in family settings, often, not always, but connection and love are often this accepted common ground. Even if it's not the felt reality, it's still what's hoped for, that should be what the common ground is. And our experiences either confirm it or go against it. Whereas in other settings, connection and love with one another, really belonging to one another, is not the starting point.
Yeah.
It feels like something that you have to earn.
You have to get there.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's not just a given.
That's interesting.
And when in this chapter, people are hard to hate up close move in, Brené Brown gives some examples of what this up closeness tension might look like. And she uses political rhetoric to do so.
Of course.
So she gives, for an example, a statement like, insert political party here, are all selfish and ignorant.
Okay.
And your experience is like, yes. Well, except for my cousin, who is a part of that, but is always so generous and welcoming and kind. They're not selfish and ignorant. And so there's this tension of like things that may feel true, but then when you actually think about the concrete relationships within your often family settings, because it's that up closeness, that may not actually be true.
Yes.
And so I think that there's some really interesting tension here of like family and familial identity can really be the source of some of the most intense conflict and deep pain. And it can also, I think, be the most resilient source of belonging. And that's super interesting to me.
Yes, yeah. There's a lot there, especially even as we try to take what we can learn from our families, whether in spite of or because of, and apply that to these other relationships, and that idea of it is hard to hate up close and not live my life 7 layers away from people where it's easy to hate,
Yes.
but try to live more up close. Yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
That's bookmarked for the future. I think we can go places there. We're talking about family of origin maybe as a church. If you're interested in that, drop it in Discord. We want to know what you want to hear more about in that term.
And the one last thing I'll say with that too is I think for me the biggest takeaway with thinking about how we can almost take this belonging as the backbone or this responsibility almost in family to make sure that belonging feels true, that can be applied to other communities. And we see this in scripture. Often familial language is used. Like people are described as brothers and
we
sisters.
are the brothers and sisters in Christ.
There's
Yeah,
different
right, yeah.
imagery and metaphor that come out
Yeah.
of family. And so I think that there's this idea of both allowing people to be complex, messy, full humans,
Yes.
and hoping for the best in others and feeling committed to one another mutually that exists if we can take like our best hopes for what family could be and bringing that into other communities too.
Church as family is, I think, an analogy that's all over the New Testament, which would be worth us kind of taking those scriptures and working them a little bit and seeing how that could affect our community, and then also just like. I heard a definition of like community. Good, like you have a lot of you have a lot of belonging in your life, to use the language from this series. And the definition was like being there for somebody in the way most people are only there for kin. And I like that. That feels that feels like worth discovering more. Yeah, as we think about belonging in community. Another topic we wanted to hit as we close the book this weekend on talking about belonging for the last month is forgiveness. I think this is another inevitability in belonging when we talk about conflict, when we talk about family of origin and maybe the way that we bring things in. Speaking of why we have conflict, our families of origin, right? That's a reason we have conflict. Forgiveness is a constant teaching in Jesus' ministry. One of I just think the scripture that I want to zoom in on today is Jesus on the cross, the victim of mob violence, praying, "Forgive them, for they know not what they are doing." Which if we just step back and take a look at that, at what's being expressed in that moment, like. I think we need to lean into that scripture, because if we read it quickly, we maybe attach a lot of meanings to it that are not actually there. Like, does that mean repress your feelings, bottle it up, right? Forgive them if they know not what they're doing. I'm not going to feel anything. I'm not going to feel them, bottle it up. Like, is that what Jesus is saying to do, or is it like another version of this is like, it's okay, I forgive them. I'm not mad. They're just ignorant. I'm not mad. I've forgiven them. It's okay. I'm not mad. Like if you've ever done that, or if you've ever experienced someone do that, you realize like, are you sure you're not mad? And it's like, so what is going on there that Jesus can say, forgive them for they know not what they're doing? Because I think it has, if we just read it quickly, we might think like, oh man, I don't know, like even the image of like when I like self-disclose if I meet somebody for the first time and they're like, you're a pastor, they kind of think like, oh my gosh, like you must be bottling it all in. So yeah.
Or even, I think this brings up this idea of forgive and forget.
Oh yeah.
Which
yes.
is not an accurate portrayal of forgiveness that we see modeled in Jesus and in Scripture. But in this case, it's like, oh, this is violence.
Jesus is forgiving and forgetting. It's okay.
But just forgive and forget.
Yeah, yeah. It has to be more than that, and it also can't be like, I forgive you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I forgive you. It's kind of, there's something else going on there. So when I think of what forgiveness really means, when I think of that, like what's happening when Jesus says, forgive them for they know not what they're doing, I think of a quote from a French activist, philosopher, mystic named Simone Weil. She wrote in the early 1900s, died young, unfortunately, but I'm going to put a quote up on the screen here because I love it so much. She said, pain and suffering are a kind of currency passed from hand to hand until they reach someone who receives them but does not pass them on. Until they reach someone who receives them but does not pass them on. Forgiveness is when, after receiving pain, after having been hurt, you've had it passed to you somehow due to some sort of reality internal to you, you're not driven to pass it on, and so the cycle stops. I think Jesus is able to genuinely say, forgive them for they know not what they do, because there's some sort of reality that Jesus is experiencing internally. He is settled. He is at peace in the love of God. He feels no drive to prove himself because he knows he belongs. He feels no drive to even scores because the belonging that he feels is not as fragile as we sometimes make it out to be when we feel so hurt. And when these are the realities that make up one's internal life, I think forgiveness naturally flows. It naturally, when the pain comes to us, what flows out of us is forgiveness. So it's not bottling it up. I think it's an outflow of hard internal work that the entire story of Jesus shows us, so that when we get to the cross and Jesus is able to say that, we've seen the work that's been put in so that flows out of him.
Yeah, there's a term that I've picked up in therapy called radical acceptance that I think fits in really well here, and I've seen this also as a really helpful way to kind of clarify what forgiveness is, because I think a lot of times forgiveness for many people can really feel entrenched in this idea that you're almost okaying whatever happened. This person caused me harm, and if I forgive them, then that's telling them that their actions
that makes it okay. Yeah. That means it'll happen again.
Yeah. And that can feel like a real betrayal of self. And then inevitably, all of that internalized pain is going to be passed on and transmitted in some way. But this idea of forgiveness as an interruption and a lot of inner work, but an interruption to pain and suffering.
Being passed.
Yes. I love that. And I think you have to have a radical acceptance of what has occurred, not okaying it in any way, not giving it your stamp of approval or brushing it away, pretending like it's not a real hard, difficult thing. But actually as a way to say, I'm not going to be stuck in bitterness or anger, because those are really exhausting places to be.
I mean, honestly, I feel like most days I can hardly fathom not keeping score and not being fueled up, not ready to pass pain to the next person. Like little slights that happen throughout the day, and you just they build up, and you. It's like if I think Simone Weil is right that it's like, oh, now I have a choice. Am I going to pass it on, or am I going to stop it here with me? And but I do think I experience this from time to time. I think I experience what we see in Jesus, and this being so important for a context like a community where we are trying to belong to one another and give each other the benefit of the doubt. I think that I experience this in prayer from time to time. The mystics like Simone Weil and others throughout the centuries, there's a phrase that many mystics will go back to, which is, we become what we behold. And this is the why have a consistent prayer life for mystics. It's why do you need a consistent prayer life? Because you become what you behold. And so if our moments spent to ourself are spent beholding possessions or things we wish to be our possessions, like we will become driven by the desire for those possessions. If the moments to ourselves are spent beholding our work, we will become defined by our work. On the other hand, if our moments to ourselves are spent beholding a person that we love or admire, we will become more like that person. This is what the mystics say. That will happen. It's a natural law of life. You become what you behold. And so that's a really good version of it. And the mystics would take it further. If our moments to ourselves are spent in prayer, beholding Jesus, we will become more like Jesus. This is the reason for prayer, according to mystics. And like the way I've learned this is this sort of prayer can be like wordless. Like you actually don't need to feel like you're an experienced prayer, or if you are an experienced prayer, maybe actually what this teaches you is to stop talking in prayer. I learned once, and you can take this with you if it feels helpful, to use your phone's timers. I set timers all the time for prayer, and so I'll just like pull out my phone and set a 5-minute timer, and I am quiet. I close my eyes. And in that moment, I am beholding in my imagination Jesus. Any story or picture of Jesus that like you have logged will do, unless it's bad. Like don't like gun-toting white American Jesus. Don't do that. But you guys are smart. You know what Jesus to behold that you want to become like, right? And so, but any story will do. If you've heard a story before, or if you have some sort of image that like grabs you of like, oh, this is something from my childhood that speaks to me of God's love, or something that you've learned here at Brownline. Any imagination of Jesus will do, and you just sit there and you're wordless and you imagine Jesus in that way. Let the scene play out. And I like as I imagine Jesus being kind or being wonderful or being non-anxious or like even being funny, you just do that 5 minutes a day, every single day. Like it's like brushing your teeth, so like doing it once probably won't do anything, but if you do it regularly, and that will, like, over time, you will become what you behold, the mystics say. And I think that is where I have found myself, like, when I'm in my most consistent spaces of doing this. I like to do it in the morning with a cup of coffee, the first thing I do when I wake up, hopefully before my 9-month-old, but not always. But I like to just sit there and set a timer and just try to become what I'm beholding in prayer. And, like, this, if I'm going to be in a place where I'm not trying to keep score and I am able to let the pain stop being passed with me, it's because I've been doing this. It's because of the internal work ahead of time.
I really love that. And I think, too, prayer is so interesting because it really is about this both internal and external process of belonging.
Right. It would be pointless for me to do this if it was just just me. It is affecting my external life, and yet it's internal work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if that's attractive to you, if you feel like you're more of an intermediate or like you have a lot more experience logged in prayer and you're ready for more, the contemplative mystics of the last like 60 years would point to 20 minutes as their like go-to. This is what they try to train people to. It's hard. I will warn you.
Feels real long.
20 minutes of quiet and contemplative prayer in this sort of imagining Jesus sort of way twice a day is what the contemplatives shoot for. I've been in seasons. I currently have a 9-month-old, so I am not in that season right now. But I've been in seasons in the recent past where I was able to do 20 minutes once a day, and man, do I feel like that was a healthy time in my life. Things would come at me, difficult things would frustrate me, and I would not pass the pain. I really do. I mean, like I swear by this. It freaking works. So yeah, try to shoot for what's the next increment of 5 minutes you can get to.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, there's one more thing that I wanted to talk about. And I think for me, we've already been talking about this a little bit, but really highlighting this connection between solitude and togetherness and how that forms our belonging. Because really, if you have this mutuality of belonging to one another, we are able to both belong to ourselves and to community simultaneously. And I think that both of those really need to be balanced for us to have a solid sense of belonging. In her writing on belonging, Cole Arthur Riley tells the story of watching her dad look at himself in the mirror. And as she was watching him, just the way he was studying his own face and looking at himself, she realized that he wasn't actually seeing himself. He was just seeing this distorted and reversed image in the mirror. And she was looking at his real face. and just wanted to hold him, wanted to like grab his cheeks and just say like, that's not your face. That's not what you look like. I think it's this really important reminder that allowing our community to mirror back to us what we look like for real,
Yeah.
not just our distorted reverse image of ourselves. It helps us know ourselves on a deeper level. It deepens our sense of belonging. And it can also, on the flip side, help us have humility when we are maybe tempted to judge someone, when we're not quite at the, I wonder why they're doing that, when they're just like, why are they doing that?
Why are they doing that? Yeah.
That maybe they're just not seeing themselves clearly. Maybe I'm not seeing myself clearly. And opening yourself up to letting others be this true mirror without being defensive is super hard. Being open to whatever they name about you is really, really vulnerable. But I think it points to the fact that often we miss our own shortcomings. But for many of us, we also miss our own beauty and our own uniqueness as well. There's this quote from Cole Arthur Riley. I think we're going to put it up on the screen here. And she writes, "We need other people to see our own faces, to bear witness to their beauty and truth. God has made it so that I can never truly know myself apart from another person. I want someone to bear witness to my face, that we could behold the image of God in one another and believe in it on one another's behalf." And I think that's really what I hold to as a vision for a faith community, that beholding the image of God in one another and believing it on one another's behalf.
That's really good.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I think for my final thoughts on belonging, I want to circle back one more time to the uniqueness of belonging to one another in the context of spiritual convictions, like a church. There is some uniqueness there. If we take any given value that I'm going to assume, here we go back to where we started with, I'm going to assume that we all kind of hold together in this room, but if not, we can do good conflict together. Now, I'm going to take, so any given progressive value we might subscribe to here, like a seat at the table for everyone, okay? Like that's a value, kind of that, we see that up on the church on the corner, right? When it's just secular convictions, like liberal economic convictions or political convictions that are behind that value rather than spiritual convictions, I think there's a real ceiling. Like if the only groundings we have behind a seat at the table for everyone are like Coca-Cola commercials and a belief in the so-called American dream, honestly, I think the evidence is that those convictions aren't powerful enough to hold people together at a table at all. They sound good, and maybe there's some good in them, but they're also just a little bit anemic. There's a low ceiling for what they are able to pull off. Systemic injustice and white male supremacy still keep so many from the table. Like the evidence is in on what historians call neoliberalism. Like it is just I don't know, I feel like we've had enough time trying to make this project keep everyone and give everyone a seat at the table, and I not everybody has a seat at the table. It's not equal. We're as polarized as ever, even among those who are at the table, right? And so on the other hand, that's like secular convictions. When we hold to the value of a seat at the table for everyone because of a spiritual conviction, like every single person bears the image of God. This is different, right? That is different. That's that calls passion. You are I need you to be able to reflect to me the image of God that I can't see because I just see a distorted image in the mirror. That is a different, it's the driving force behind that calls out passion and calls out places in us that even really, really good secular convictions like political or economic convictions can't. They just can't pull those out. And this is the uniqueness, I think, of belonging to one another in the context of spiritual convictions. Obviously, we need to ensure we're talking about mature spiritual convictions, right? There are plenty of immature spiritual convictions. They are all around us, and they are exclusionary, and they're about boosting each other's egos, and they're about continuing white supremacy and male dominance. So we need to make sure we're talking about mature spiritual convictions, not immature ones. But man, if we can talk about mature spiritual convictions, every single person bears the image of God. That has fuel behind it that we could never touch with policy or legalese, or, like the best political stump speech. Cool, like that's great. But like, I don't know, the spiritual digs deeper. And that, I think, it's a resource that we would be leaving. It's the most important resource we'd be leaving aside if we didn't tap into that when we're trying to belong.
Absolutely. Yeah. As we close here, I do want to just end with kind of a last call to action or concrete ways that you can hopefully help to deepen your sense of belonging here. Different opportunities for you to have someone else mirror back to you what you really look like and be a mirror to other people in this community too. So you have a few different options. There's not just kind of one pathway to belonging here, lots of different options based on where you're at and what your needs might be. So the first is communal matches. I'll just run through these real quick just as a little reminder. So this is where you are set up to be matched monthly. The next ones are going out
End of February.
End of February. And this might be, you might be matched with someone in this community that is in a very similar stage of life as you, or maybe in a really different season of life. You can grab coffee, have a meal together, do some type of activity together. And this is just to help you make more connections with a wider range of people so that you can show up at the Davis on Sunday and say like, hey, I know that face. We've actually talked before.
Yeah.
Mentoring is another option as well. So Vince helped us kind of look through the importance of intergenerational relationships and how that can actually be a pretty unique feature of faith communities. And we really want to lean into that and encourage that here. So this would be a one-on-one pairing. Maybe you want to be a mentor to someone that is younger than you, or maybe you are looking for a mentor yourself. So you can specify either one of those if you express interest in mentoring.
And this is for adults and also for kids.
Yes.
And so we're setting up mentoring pairings in terms of like, big sibling type mentoring pairings for teenagers and kids, and then also for young adults with older adults.
Yeah. And for both communal matches and mentoring, Vince would be your point person for talking more about that. And then if you are interested in joining or starting up a small group, I would love to talk with you more. We have a lot of different things that are actively forming right now. So there has been some expressed interest in a podcast discussion group, a book club, a couples group, and the most recent one is a nature or hiking or walking group, which I think is really cool.
Oh, that's a nice idea. I like that.
So there's also, I wanted to mention this too, there's been some interest with online folks who aren't maybe local to Chicago, but having a virtual group, and that is definitely an option as well. So there is a general information form that the link would take you to, but you can also feel free to text me or message me on Discord if you have any specific interests in mind that aren't something I've already listed. A lot of flexibility there.
Great. Lovely. I would love to lead us in prayer, and I think I'm going to try to lead us in. I'm literally going to set a timer for 5 minutes, and we're going to take that time to pray. So what we're doing, again, as I was saying before, is we are trying to become what we are beholding. We may or may not have an experience in this moment doing this. That's okay if you don't have something that feels to you like spiritual movement, because again, this is like brushing your teeth. If we do it once, we probably won't have healthy teeth, but if we do it regularly, that's when we start to see the benefits. But I want us to, give us a chance to do it. So we're going to imagine Jesus doing something. I'm going to play a game here. Give me a Jesus story. Somebody, shout one out. Loaves and fishes. Okay, so Jesus feeding tons and tons of people who have gathered. That is what we're imagining in our head. Jesus feeding tons and tons of people who have gathered, okay? All right, I'm going to set a timer. We're going to be quiet. I might lead us in some deep breaths to begin, just to kind of help us feel safe with we're going to be quiet for 5 minutes, and that's a long time. And then we're off and running. Sound good? All right, great. Let's take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Deep breath in and a deep breath out. One more deep breath in and a deep breath out. And I encourage you to keep your eyes closed, but if it helps you to just kind of focus on one thing in the theater that you just that has your eyes gripped, that can help us if we're a distractible person. I want you to imagine Jesus feeding tons of people. Imagine Jesus' face, what his facial expression is like, what his body language is. Imagine the body language and the facial expressions of those Jesus is feeding. Where are you in the scene? Are you watching from afar? Are you one of the people being fed? Are you one of the disciples that Jesus is handing food to distribute among the people? And at this point, usually in a prayer, I imagine myself pulling Jesus aside and saying, here are all the things that I'm distracted by right now. Here are all the stresses running through my brain. Do you know what happened to me last week? Oh, you do? Okay, yeah. Do you know what's on my plate for this week upcoming? Oh, yeah, you know that too. Okay. And I just kind of unload for a little bit and let Jesus see me. I am so burdened. There's so many demands on me. I'm so distractible. Oh, I call myself names. And for this last minute, I want you to imagine Jesus' facial expression and body language as Jesus looks at you. One more deep breath in with me. And out. And that was 5 minutes. We did it. Can do it again, right? That's good. That's good.
15 more.
50. See, now you see how difficult it is to become a mystic. But perhaps we can reach someday to get to 20 minutes. And the health will just be teeming out of us. It'll be amazing. It was good. It's good to do that together with you all. And I do hope that you can kind of take that practice with you as we go ahead. All right. We're closing the book on belonging for now. We look forward to, we're looking ahead to Lent, which begins at the end of February here with Ash Wednesday, and then Lent is the 40 days that lead up to Good Friday and Easter Sunday when we mark Jesus' death and resurrection as a church. So the next couple of Sundays before we're into the season of Lent, we're going to be talking about the experiment we're going to do as a church over Lent. It's similar to last year, where it's kind of traditional to during Lent give up something for Lent. Give up chocolate is the classic if you grew up Catholic like I did. But we started a tradition last year, and we're going to continue it. So now it's a tradition because we've done it. We're going to have done it 2 years in a row, and that means it's annual. So it's our annual tradition of giving up false beliefs for Lent. So we're going to, that'll be our theme, and we'll tell you more about that over the next couple weeks. If you are new or newer with us as you're joining today here in the theater or online, and you're not sure that we have your contact information yet, we would love for you to fill out our online Connect card. You can follow the QR code there up on the screen, or if you're in Discord right now, we'll drop the link in there. And this will get you on our email newsletter list so you know what's coming each Sunday or if we have other events going on. And then also it gives Hayley and I a chance to reach out to you and get to know you better, and we can grab coffee and hear how you connected with the church, and we want to know, like, what are people's stories and how can we help you connect. So please follow that if you would like to. Other ways to hear about what's going on in our community is to follow us at Brownline Church on social, or all of our previous messages are available via YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Brownline Church in those places. I'll give a quick financial update. If you get something out of this community, if you believe in the vision of this church, we would love for you to consider giving as well. This is how our church keeps the lights on and how our pastors pay the bills. You can follow the QR code up there on the screen to give, or go to brownlinechurch.org/donate at any time. December was we ended the year really strong, which is really meaningful to us, as we were encouraging everybody to think about what they'd given for the year and if they wanted to give toward the end of the year. So we're especially thank you for December, and we'll close the books on January this month, and we'll have updates for you as we always do next Sunday. All right, I'll close there, and Hayley will lead us in communion.
So each week we close our time together with the practice of communion. Communion is this unique spiritual and physical marker that followers of Jesus have come back to as a spiritual practice, and a reminder of just the beauty that we see modeled in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. It's this physical reminder of a meal shared, that we need nourishment beyond what we can offer ourselves. And so we'll have something to eat and something to drink here. If you are in the theater with us, we'll pass around some crackers and juice. If you're joining online, you can feel free to grab whatever is convenient. And then we will come back together and take these elements together and pray as we close our time. So we really wanted to lean into the communal aspect of communion here. So this is really a wonderful time for you to chat with the people around you. So I'll invite you to stand up, say hello to some old friends, meet some new folks, and then we will pass around elements and come back together. Oh, here we go. I always forget to mention this every week. If anyone, and don't feel bad interrupting things right now if you need it. Does anyone need gluten-free communion that didn't get any? Just wave your hand and I'll come bring it to you. Okay. If you need it next week, it's available. I always forget that. Well, if you would join me in closing our time together with communion. On the night that Jesus was betrayed, he shared a meal with his community, and he broke bread, gave thanks, and said, "This is my body broken for you. Eat this in remembrance of me." Likewise, he took the cup and said, "This is my blood poured out for you. Drink of this in remembrance of me." And so, Jesus, we remember you this morning as one who was free-flowing with forgiveness, who interrupted pain and suffering and didn't transmit that to those around you, but offered grace and connection and love freely. And so, God, as we think about our own journey of belonging and how that will continue, may we be ones who also offer love and belonging to others freely. May we have the patience to interrupt pain and suffering, to not pass that on. God, would you guide us in ways that make that a little bit easier? And I thank you for the gift of community, that we do not figure this all out on our own, but that we have one another. We can look to one another and see your face. Amen. Thank you so much for being here this morning, and we'll see you next week.